Hi everybody, welcome back to Raw Food Philosophy on YouTube. In this video, I'd like to make the case that we need to move beyond science to intuition when it comes to nutrition. And I actually think this is true in a lot of different areas of life. I think that intuition, when it comes down to it, intuition takes into account all the factors that exist in a situation. Intuition is going to be what tells you what the right action to do in the moment is. And for all of our science, for all our scientific studies, they can inform our intuition, but the scientific studies themselves are partial. And so I'll start by talking about kind of my own field and how this relates to kind of my own field. So I've worked in education for most of my career. I've worked in the schools, and I added a license quite a while ago now called ABS, an Academic and Behavioral Specialist. And a lot of your training has to do with, we'll just take like the behavior side. So a lot of your training has to do with concrete interventions to help a student, improve their pro-social behavior in school. Or just kind of get along in school without negative behaviors. And throughout the training, when I was going through my training, this is probably about 10 years ago now, all the talk was about SRBIs, scientifically research-based interventions. And in all of these studies, they would isolate. They would take baseline data, then they would enact a certain intervention, and then they would take the results, and they'd say that this is a scientifically research-based intervention. Like one really small intervention that you could do was like provide choice. It's far more likely that a student is going to, if I tell a student, here's your pencil. For a while I worked in like these behavior programs that for students who were kind of pulled out of the normal education setting, and if I told them, here's your pencil, they're probably they might throw it back at me, they might throw it at the wall, whatever, they might tell me to go whatever. But if I held out like 4 or 5 pencils and I said, which one do you want, the student was far more likely to take a pencil, and just providing them that choice and that agency help them in that moment. And there's all kinds of those little things you can do, and all these research-based interventions. And the interventions are good. The studies are good. It's helpful to have studies that say this intervention works. But all studies are also partial, right? All studies are done in a specific context, in a specific part of town, with a specific demographic of students. It's up to the person, it's up to me in the moment to decide which intervention I want to use, which action or which intervention is right for this particular student, right? That the scientific study doesn't tell me that this student didn't get any sleep last night, and their parents brought him home at 5 a.m. and put him on a school bus at 6 a.m. Right? The scientific studies don't tell me that this student has a when we're entering a particular classroom, has a specific issue with another student in that room, and that's going to be the reason why they might act a certain way, right? There's all kinds of, there's thousands of factors. There's literally kind of almost infinite factors into why a student might act in a certain way in a particular setting. And it's up to me in the moment to take all that into account, to decide how I talk to the student, to decide what works best. And at the end of the day, that's intuition. That is intuitive. The studies can't tell you all the factors in the moment, and so intuition kind of wins. Another case where when maybe you're making a decision and you have a pro and con list, and you set out all the pros and the cons of making this. Say I don't know, maybe I'm going to move. I'm going to move to a new city because I just need a fresh start, right? I can set out a pro list and a con list, and all these different reasons why this might be good or this might be bad. But at the end of the day, it's a gut feeling, and it's a gut call. Another quick example, I'll say one more example that's not kind of nutrition based, but so in coaching, I used to coach football, and people love to be armchair quarterbacks and armchair coaches, and there's a lot of people out there that talk about analytics. In baseball, there's a movie called Moneyball where baseball is super heavily analytics now, but let's just say in football, there's all these charts to say, what do the statistics say in this particular case? What does the chart say is the right play to call or the right decision to make? Should I go for it on fourth or should I not? Should I kick the field goal or should I not? And there's all these charts on the percentage outcome on all those things. But the charts, a coach in the moment takes into account all the factors that go into that game. They take into account the fact that they know that their quarterback, isn't prepared for this one particular situation, or the wind is a certain way, and he knows that his kicker struggles with that particular thing, or at the end of the day, your gut, your intuition is taking into account all of the statistics. So people who really hammer on coaches for making this or that call because the chart says this or the chart says that, the chart takes into partial account but the coach takes into account all the factors that go into that particular situation. And in fact, I think any situation in life, how you are interacting with people in the world, comes down to intuition. What's the right thing to say? Should you give somebody space? In this or that situation, should you say this or that? Is it going to be taken in a good way or a bad way? Like, we're always using kind of intuitive ability. And I think the same thing is true in nutrition. So you can, just like in education, you can find a study to tell you anything you want. And oftentimes you can find studies to tell you kind of conflicting things in nutrition. But these studies are isolating one particular component, right? So say this study says that, this control group who got, or, this study group who got X amount of protein, they had this particular strength gain over a course of 6 weeks, and the control group that got less protein didn't. Even nutritional studies are so, the amount of factors that go into why a particular group did or did not come out in a certain way it's very hard in the human body, in the human condition, to truly isolate one particular factor and say this is the exact reason why this happened. We can generalize. The studies aren't bad. They give us some general information, but they also only tell you one thing. So maybe this amount of protein got this amount of gains over 6 weeks, but also that it hurt those participants, their digestion wasn't as good, or a different metric that wasn't just pure muscle gain. Maybe their like flexibility was hampered, or maybe their like joint pain and inflammation was affected by that. So when you're isolating for one particular metric, that's part of a whole picture. So I'd like to make the case that just like all these other situations in life, we need to move beyond science to intuition in our nutrition. It is, if you are eating a certain diet and you feel right on it and it feels good to you in all the different ways that you can feel good, and it's intuitively right. I feel that way a lot with, fresh organic fruits and, lettuce and celery and peppers, and there's an intuitive, when you get onto a raw food diet. So this whole channel and the course is about a raw food diet and lifestyle. It is intuitively, to me, at this, being on the other side of like transitioning to the diet, it is intuitively good for my body to have these foods. It's intuitively good to me to have these ideal foods that you would find and eat in their natural forms. And I don't need a scientific study to tell me that anything. I don't. I could find a bunch of scientific studies that say I'm on a very low protein diet and I'm probably going to lose strength because I'm on a low protein diet. Well, that hasn't been my experience at all. That hasn't been my experience in the slightest. So all that to say, I think nutrition and diet and lifestyle, just like any other thing in life, the scientific studies can help us create some general patterns, but at the end of the day, your intuition is going to be what takes into account all the different factors. All the different factors for what does it take to be healthy, what does it take to feel good. So to me, experimenting with all the different kinds of diets out there and kind of settling on this like raw food, raw vegan diet, these ideal foods that you would find and eat in their natural forms. It's intuitive to me now that this is the ideal diet for humans. It's intuitive to me that these foods are doing my body right and that I'm becoming healthier and healthier the longer I'm on it in a whole variety of ways. So that's the case I want to make. I want to make the case that you could spend nutrition is just a perfect example of how we break things down in thousands of different ways and do this study on this exact amino acid or this exact chemical. There's a guy who I really like, Andrew Huberman, but he will break things down as far as you can possibly break things down as far as like the nutritional science. But at the end of the day, you're still isolating one exact variable, and you're not taking into account the full picture. The full picture is intuitive health. It's intuitive how you feel. And I think if you try a raw food diet, I think that will become something that's kind of intuitive to you and obvious to you that these are the foods that are making your body as healthy as it can be. So you have to decide, if that's true or not for yourself, but that's the case I'd like to make. So check out the course on Udemy if you're interested in learning more and experimenting with a raw food diet.